All right, I am here live with my good friend and colleague, Paul Ciolino. He is the world famous criminal investigator from Chicago, Illinois. Paul, please tell people a little bit of something about yourself, your background, and how we know each other.
Well, I've been an investigator, mostly criminal in state, federal, and local offices since 1974, my whole professional life. Mostly criminal defense, a lot of criminal defense. Also, I ran the child homicide and mass molestation unit in the state of Illinois for a number of years. So I've worked both sides of these issues in the criminal justice system.
And how do we know each other? How long have we known each other? I mean, we're both pretty old, but you're a little older.
Brett and I have known each other since Brett was a mere college student hanging out with Henry Lee in Connecticut. And he had to call me up and tell me one day that I was putting on a world-class symposium of experts. And he had to tell me that one of my experts was basically a fraud and a horrible criminal profiler and didn't know what he was doing. And that was my introduction to Turvey.
Yeah, and that, just to be very clear, that criminal profiler was one of the FBI's, one of the FBI guys who was trained by, he was not FBI, but he was trained by the FBI. His name was Ray, what was his name?
He was a New York City police detective who had taken the profiler course with the FBI.
Right, and he was, how do I put this? He was reassigned not much later than that. He was, he was not kept on for long. And it was essentially for lack of results. He didn't like to go to crime scenes or examine evidence. He just liked to write memos. That was his thing. So
and speak at conferences.
He did. He was big on conferences, not so big on casework. So we've had a really long, storied relationship. Have we ever worked any cases together? I can't remember. It's all a blur to me.
We worked a lot of cases together, actually. We worked Arturo Gotti together.
Yep.
We worked a number of cases over the years, and quite successfully, actually.
I have to say this. One of my favorite things about you is that you are, when you're in charge of a case, you're like a general. You are very good at finding the people who are competent and who have a particular skill set and then setting them to task to do the things that need to be done on a case. But that's the other thing you're really good at, is identifying what needs to get done.
Is having the ability to put together phenomenal teams of people who work well together.
Right.
And who are credible and well-trained
right.
and very experienced at what they do. And we don't do it to get a consensus, but we do it basically to check each other.
Right.
Make sure the right things are done.
Right, and that's the thing. One of the things I've talked to this about my students, I've talked about other colleagues, I've written about it. This is one of the hallmarks of being a professional, is that other professionals will work with you. Other professionals, you can develop relationships with them and they last a lifetime, right?
Yes, if you're competent and you're honest and you have some morals about you and you state opinions that are based on fact, you should be able to work with professionals from all sorts of different backgrounds. The trouble starts to leak in these things is when somebody has an agenda or is trying to offer an opinion that is not fact-based, but opinion-based. And opinions are wonderful, but they're not too wonderful if they're not backed up by the facts.
Right. That's what it feels to me like that's the ground we get into. Like the science gives us the facts and the evidence, and then you're supposed to have expert opinions when you're dealing with people who are trying to get evidence into court. But regular people who are non-expert, they just have opinions that are not checked or qualified.
Well, of course, our favorite is the old homicide detective who's been assigned homicides for a number of years.
Yes.
And their expertise is based on the fact they've been doing it for a long time.
Right.
Not that they're doing it well or they're doing it properly or they're following any sort of recognized protocol, but they seem to be an expert because they've lasted a long time at a certain job.
They haven't gotten fired. That's their expertise.
They will hang on, and we often find through political connections, family connections, or something along those lines.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And one of the other things I see a lot of, and this is true now, remember when the Daubert ruling came out in the United States? The United States versus Daubert, basically what it did is it allowed people to, it required the court to have some sort of showing of expertise on the part of the expert. And so what happened is all these organizations popped up to certifying credential experts that were credential mills. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, we see this with semi-professional organizations, which are basically organizations that give out Boy Scout merit badges to each other for being wonderful and being an expert.
Right.
And they get credentials, and then they walk into a course and go, I am credentialed by the following groups. Well, the problem is none of these groups have ever been examined as to how they credential somebody. And what we have found throughout the years is that if you pay a fee and you may or may not have attended a class of instruction of some sort, they will get a certificate saying you're an expert. You're a board certified expert. Board certified, of course, being the key. And we know really medical profession started the board certified movement in this country many, many years ago. And they did it for a number of various reasons, but mostly to ensure that the doctors who were practicing, for instance, neurosurgeons, emergency room physicians, which came very late in the game, you had to develop criteria to make them an expert or a board certified person. The criteria was very difficult. What we've seen, though, in the criminal justice system is the criteria is, can you write a check and go up and get your certificate or a mailing address they can send it to. That's the basis of a lot of experts in the criminal justice system.
I have found this is especially true when you're dealing with people who claim expertise, who either lack real experience or lack an actual education. Now, I know this is it's a hard thing because people from one generation tend to have less, people from another generation tend to have more. But what I found is, regardless of any of that, regardless of what your current standing is, if you don't respect a formal education, one of the things that happens is your scholarship suffers. One of the things I've always been impressed about with you is I always assume, because you don't have a PhD like some of us, I always assume that, and it's a mistake. It's a mistake I make with you because you're one of the exceptions that prove the rule. When I read your reports, you're dealing with somebody who's very well written, someone who's very well read, and someone who actually knows how to put together a series of arguments and ideas. And that's not everybody. Not everybody can do that. Did you? And I noticed you just had some guests. I thought you were alone in the world. I didn't know you had family.
Well, I was alone, and the party just showed up, so I'm moving.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. So that's the thing. One of the things that you show again and again is you learn that people who can write competent reports, people who can actually write books, people who can actually write articles, that's how they show and demonstrate their prowess and their expertise. And you've never had a problem doing that.
Well, listen, experts are there's only one way to show your expertise, and excuse me for all the moving.
No, no problem.
That is the ability to express yourself in writing.
Oh my God!
We see this as a big problem in our business. And I'll give you a perfect example. Take a police report. Most police reports look like they were written by somebody with a fourth grade education.
Totally true.
Who leaves out about 80% of the facts that happen. They're biased in the fact that they're only reporting what they want you to hear, not what actually occurred. And so we see this a lot. And what makes an expert credible is their ability to deal with all the facts of the case. And a lot of those facts often are not going to jive with the theory that they want you to believe. But a real expert says, listen, here are the facts. I don't make up the facts, but here they are, and here's my take on it.
So not only that you've examined the evidence, but then you can put them together in a meaningful fashion, write them down in a report, and then be able to testify about that.
Exactly, so that the trier of fact, be it a jury or a judge, can understand what you're trying to say in a way that has some factual basis behind it.
One of the tests that I use for people is if I'm working with them is I say, well, let me see one of your reports. One of the things you've written before. Let me see your resume. Let me see your reports. And you'd be surprised at how many people can't pass that test. One, maybe they don't even have a resume. But two, they don't write reports because they don't testify in court. So they're dealing in a whole different realm than we are.
Well, I would tell all our listeners, the minute you find out that somebody hasn't written a report, you quit listening to them. Because it has no factual basis. And I've seen this in the private investigation industry thousands of times. So-and-so gets on TV and makes a statement, and television people have a tendency to just believe it because it's on film. Well, the fact is, and I've always said, did he give you a report? Did you read his report?
Right.
And I would tell you 90% of the time, I'd go, well, no. And I know for a fact, certain investigators have never written a report in their life.
Right. And I've seen the same thing with people who are police investigators. Mike, one of the fun ones, and you've seen this over and over again, you and I have both seen this, is where you get in a unit, you've got one guy who knows how to write a report. He writes a report. There are 10 guys in the unit, and all 10 of them submit the same report with their name on it. The same exact wording, same exact facts and details and summaries with no alterations hardly at all except for their name and the date and the time, right? Have you seen that before?
Well, I've seen other people write reports and other people put their name to it, and when you hold their feet to the fire, you find out they didn't write a word of it.
Right.
And that gives them, there's not much credibility to hand in somebody else's work and claim it as your own.
Oh, but that, now you're starting to make fun of the way things are done south of the border. I don't know if we can do that.
Well, we're also done that way El Norte.
Yeah, I know. Well,
we have lived it for the last 35 years in this country.
Yeah, one of the things...
What we're trying to avoid south of the border is to create good habits now when they're just started.
Right. They're just starting to deal with the adversarial system. We want them to get to help and develop and understand what good habits are and not to make our mistakes. That's the most important thing, not to make the mistakes that we have made.
Exactly.
So I really appreciate that note. That's really very good. One of the things we're going to be doing this week, you and I are getting together with Maestro Aurelio Coronado. We're going to be in San Carlos with him this weekend, correct? Talk to me a little bit about that. We're going to be talking about, basically, your lecture is going to be drawn from your chapter in this book, our new textbook, Forensic Investigation. Paul Ciolino wrote a chapter in this called, what was it called, Paul? I can't remember.
Well, it's basically interviews and interrogations, and you and I co-wrote it together.
Yep.
I, of course, did what we just said you should not do, is I let you put your name on my document. But your name is on the book, so you get to choose.
Well, I put a little polish on it. I took your genius, your clear, unmitigated genius, and I just polished it a little bit. I just took a little, and I added a few references, to little scholarship. That's all. I couldn't help but I wanted to see my name next to yours. I couldn't help myself.
So if you're all listening, here's how this works. I'm basically a bricklayer. I just lay bricks.
Right.
And Turby's an architect, and he makes sure the bricks are straight and in line, and the wall doesn't fall down on us later on.
Or me in particular.
Yeah, we've been doing this for years, so we all make sure Turby, who is the best writer amongst us, and the smartest guy with the most credentials.
Oh, no.
We of course just live in this world, and we're glad to be there.
You're too generous, but I think I have been to your world before. I would live in your world, but I don't want to get shot at. Chicago's very dangerous.
Yeah, it is a very dangerous place, and there's nowhere in Mexico that can. There's a few places that Chicago can compete very well with in Mexico.
Tell me, what was this last weekend like? Was everybody okay?
The weekend's not over because it's a holiday weekend in the United States this weekend. But the last count I heard was 39 shot, 1 dead.
Just this weekend.
This weekend, since Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's not counting Monday, so we'll be up to 50 by the end of the day. It's a credit to the paramedics in the city of Chicago that most of the people survive gunshot wounds now. 20 years ago, they did not survive them. But 20 years ago, they weren't shooting 50 every weekend. Fantastic.
And you've written a number of textbooks over the years. The most recent one you wrote was a biography of Stanley Zeidlow, the person who created the EMS system in the United States, or the model for it in the United States, correct?
Yeah, Dr. Zidlow also created the board certification test for emergency physicians, but he's the father of the paramedic system, which the entire world uses today, which is paramedics respond to trauma situations, be it plane wrecks, car accidents, or gunshot wounds.
Exactly.
So we have Dr. Zidlow to thank for that, and I might add, Dr. Zidlow and I and Brett have worked together in the past. Dr. Zidlow's been dead for almost 2 years now.
Yep.
But we have worked with Dr. Zidlow on a number of occasions throughout the
an impressive individual.
Responsible for the saving of millions of lives, actually. Right up there with the polio vaccination.
Right. Well, here's the point that you make all the time, and I don't think it's been made well enough. That the reason that we have shootings and not deaths in Chicago is because of the response of the EMS. They get there quickly. They know what they're doing. They're actually board certified. They actually have training, tools, and they save lives. So the cases that would normally have been homicides, and might be homicides in other states or other jurisdictions, they're actually be able to save their life in where everything started, right?
They're so incredibly competent that people are surviving gunshot wounds to the head regularly now,
Right.
which 10 years ago that wasn't happening. But unlike our profession, the criminal justice system,
Yeah.
where there's very little meaningful certification,
That's
the
right.
paramedics are certified, are licensed by the state,
Right.
and no fooling around with their stuff. They make them pass a rigid set of standards and tests, and if you don't pass it, you're not going to be riding in the back of an ambulance trying to save lives.
And that's the thing. The weight of what we do in the justice system is high enough that we should care that much. We should be making it that hard for people to get certified. What would you say about an organization or a group that just handed out certifications to anyone, to students or to people who've never even done the work?
Well, those are meaningless certifications, and I would urge anybody who's considering attending a course of that nature, that they just hand out paper to you, to not do it, because someone like us is going to come along, and we're going to investigate the people behind that organization, and we're going to investigate what you actually had to do to get that certification. And when you get on a witness stand, we're going to embarrass and shame you and show that you're really not qualified to be talking about what you're talking about. So you really should be very judicious and careful about whom you do business with and whom you let educate you, allegedly educate you, because
Right.
they're really not educating you. They're handing out merit badges.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the thing. The ability to testify in court without getting your credibility just shattered by the things you've done in the past. That's what it means to be a forensic expert.
Well, and that's a good segue into what we were talking about earlier prior to going on camera, and that is there's always going to be somebody that investigates you and what you're doing.
Right. Oh,
and
right.
you have to be credible when you testify in a court of law, because you're testifying about somebody's life or somebody's
Yep.
freedom.
Yep.
And if you're scheming and lying and just saying things somebody wanted you to say, you will be found out eventually. And it can ruin your career and your reputation.
That's right. We experience this a great deal. People will say things and people will make a splash with some information or with an opinion or with something that's unfounded. The problem is that the general public doesn't follow up. That's not what they do. But there are people like us. Our job in the criminal justice system is to follow up, to examine the evidence, to dig to the truth and find out what really happened, and later on to determine whether or not there's any legal consequences. One of the things we don't hear about often enough are the end of the stories where people they say a lie or say something that's not true about a case, and then eventually that's going to come out, and eventually it's going to end careers. And that person, you're never going to hear their name again. Why? Because they were in the profession for a few minutes, they made a lot of mistakes, and now they're done.
Well, we have seen this with all sorts of experts who have made statements that aren't true, who have lied,
Yeah,
who have created evidence, and they've had their lives and careers destroyed because they got caught. Because, as my wife, who's a very good attorney, always says, we're the guys that read the instructions on the box.
That's that's such a great way of putting it.
That's right. And when you read the instructions, you know what the rules are. We deal with a lot of people who have no idea what the rules are. They think the rules are what they say they are.
Right.
When in fact, we all have a very rigid set of rules and standards that we should be paying attention to.
That's totally
but
true.
all people in our business do not.
They do, but it eventually catches up with them. They may be able to do it for a little while, but eventually they're going to get caught by somebody who's actually a professional. They're going to get taken to task.
You're going to get caught eventually, and you're going to get your bell rung. You're going to be embarrassed and shamed.
Oh, yeah.
And why would you ruin 20 or 30 years of a great body of work for some instant gratification to say something just so you sound smart?
It's because you don't have a great body of work. You have nothing, so you're just making stuff
The whole
up.
body of work caves in and
Right.
puts on top of you.
Exactly.
And every work down they're opening the jail cell doors and letting everyone out of the prison.
It's what and that is something that actually happens. So that's not actually an exaggeration.
We see it in laboratories all the time. We see it with so-called experts,
Yeah.
fingerprint experts, DNA experts who have lied and made up
yeah.
evidence, who have planted evidence. If you do it, you're going to get caught, and we're the guys that are going to catch you eventually.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. We've seen it in the criminal profiling arena. We've had expert after expert in the profiling arena fall because of the fact that they get on the stand, they make false statements about their expertise, their credentials, their experience, their affiliations, and they give false testimony about their findings based on evidence that they didn't examine or evidence that didn't exist, and it either winds up getting the wrong people implicated or the wrong people get out of jail because the case was handled improperly. So we see it in every discipline.
this country since the 90s at least,
Oh.
where it's literally hundreds and hundreds of people have been let off of death row,
Yep.
life sentences because the police have been found to create evidence, lie, make up, plant, or ignore who actually did the crime
Yep.
because they had an agenda to put this person in prison.
And
they get caught.
That's the other thing.
Eventually get caught.
I want to just say that a very interesting point there. One of my earliest cases was the West Memphis case, and that I don't want to talk about it. What I'll say is my involvement in that case was pro bono, and I wound up doing more work on that case than almost any other case I've ever worked on, and it keeps coming back in different forms. It kept coming back in different forms for almost, what was it? It was basically 13 years, 14 years until the three got let out of prison. It just kept coming back in different forms. And this is the important point. Your career is going to you're going to have if you have a long career, it's going to be marked by involvements in cases that keep coming back for one reason or another, right? Talk to me a little bit about that. That's such an interesting thing people don't realize.
Well, listen, these cases almost never die.
No.
And there's, especially today, there's activists everywhere. And a lot of you people who are coming may be family members of someone who's incarcerated that should not be incarcerated.
Right.
And we can't stress this enough. I have been involved, as well as Brett, in cases where the family members are responsible for bringing to light the injustice because they never gave up on their father, their brother, their sister, etc. And they fought and they fought, and they finally found someone like us to listen to them.
Right.
And if we examine this evidence and we find out that they are in fact telling the truth, that this person did not commit that crime,
Right.
This case has come back now. It could come back 5-6 times in different jurisdictions, courthouses, but it gathers a lot of steam, and it's critical that we're going to examine everything. Right. That's the bottom line. We're going to look at all the evidence, and if someone lied or created or manufactured, we're going to catch them.
Well, here's the fun part about that. It cuts both ways. You have family members who one, have somebody in custody or who's incarcerated or convicted who they believe is innocent. That's one type of case. The other type of case is where you have family members of victims who have been killed and their case hasn't been investigated at all, or the evidence has been misunderstood or misrepresented or mishandled, and so they need a real investigation to take place. One of the things that has to be true is that your credibility as a forensic expert has to withstand the scrutiny of all time. So every time you do work a case, it has to be done so well and so tight that it has to be able to withstand multiple attacks over the years, right? I mean, that's what you're getting at.
Well, and I should mention, because Brett and I are currently working a case where a woman was murdered by her husband in the Chicago area,
Right.
and they called it a suicide. Now, there's many agencies involved in this thing. The medical examiner's office, which did not do an autopsy, they're required to do so for whatever reason. The police agency that initially handled it called it a suicide 5 minutes after showing up.
That's right.
We have overwhelming evidence she was murdered. Now, all of these people involved are going to be shamed and embarrassed when the truth comes out. That basically this woman was murdered by her husband, a policeman. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do during the court investigation. It'll come out he was never interviewed, that his computers and phones were never searched for evidence. Right. And all sorts of neglect and misconduct come bubbling to the surface because we got involved.
That's right. This is a case, and I think I mentioned this to you when we took it. This case mirrors so closely the Mariana Lima case, it's not even funny, where you have a woman who's alleged to have hung herself in a way that couldn't have happened, where the husband is a police officer, where the police didn't do their investigation because it's their buddy, and where it's declared a suicide within minutes of finding the body. It's absolutely just such a interesting parallel to the Mariana Lima case, the most famous case in Mexico of a femicide, the one that changed all the laws and all the rules. That case in Mexico was taken forward to the Supreme Court by the victim's mother. Then that's the message we want to get out, which is that the people who are most capable of bringing these cases forward, the most motivated, are going to be the family members, because they are the ones who have access to the material, and they're the ones who can actually bring the justice. Unfortunately, when the police, and this isn't true in every case, but when the police have decided that they're not going to do an investigation, or that they're going to make a political call rather than a factual scientific call, that's when you need to bring pressure to bear. And that's when you need to have all the right information and the right experts lined up to actually come into the case and make a difference. That's the only And we've been able to successfully do that on a number of cases in our careers. That's kind of what we specialize in. Unfortunately, there's a need for that.
This is all true, and what we try to tell people when we're teaching these seminars, like we're teaching this coming weekend,
Yep.
is everybody has a voice,
Yep.
But if you want to have a voice, you've got to be credible. You can't make up
That's
stuff.
right.
You just can't throw it at a wall and pull sticks. We base our opinions based on factual evidence, things
Right.
that we know we can prove.
Right.
A lot of times we know, we think, we guess, we're guessing right because we have so much experience, but we still know at the end of the day we have to back it up with facts.
Right, right. If it doesn't survive to the form where it gets into the report, it didn't happen. It's not a real thing.
That's right. It's not written down. It didn't happen. That's something
right.
everybody should remember when authoring a report. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen.
That's right.
It has to be documented.
And it has to be done in such a way that other people can read and understand it. And
Documented. You just can't say, I believe, I think, I guess, I know, maybe,
No, you
perhaps. That doesn't work.
no, it does not. Is there any other thing you want to tell anybody before we meet up this weekend in San Carlos? Because I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I would tell you, listen, you're getting world-class training at a very reasonable price by people who have been doing it collectively for 100 years now, literally.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that anyone who's watching this, just getting a small taste of what we do, and of course, it'll be much more meaningful when you're there in person and you get to listen to it, talk to us, and we're more than happy to talk to you about any cases you're currently involved in, where we think you may, how we can help you, or what you should be doing to bring a successful conclusion to it. So it's not easy for us to uproot our lives, travel down to Mexico, and meet with you all. But it's a pleasure and an honor for us to do so, and that's why we continue to do it, and we'll continue to do it for in the years to come.
Right. And the clinic, the lecture, you can register for the lecture, and that's all great. But if you are someone who is bringing a case and you need us to examine it for you, to give you some initial insights and opinions and some guidance, that's not something we're charging for. We're just going to do that just to provide that service while we're there. Because the other thing that we have seen over and over again is the extreme poverty. And the poverty that exists in Mexico for some of the family victims' members, it traps them in a way that is, to us, unconscionable. So we're happy to provide that service for free.
Well, you're happy to do it. I'm not happy to provide it for free, but in this occasion,
you're going to do it.
Happy and glad because it's nice and sunny, and I could work on the tan, so I'm not so damn white.
There you go. And plus, I'll glare at you if you don't do it.
That's right. I'll get the dirty look, the turby look.
That's right. You're right. I will give it to you. I'm not ashamed.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to tell people before we sign off? How was your weekend?
Well, look forward to seeing you guys. This is fun to do. We're glad to do it. Listen, we're spreading the gospel. We want things done right.
Exactly.
We want them done properly. We want you who are embarking on a new system
Yep.
to have the tools to do it right, to make sure that you're able to show the government this is how it's supposed to be done.
Right.
This is the correct way for it to be done, and we're more than happy to share that knowledge with you.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your time this morning, Paul. And I just hope that you can get on the plane before you get shot. That's the most important thing. Because Chicago is a little dangerous.
The rest of the week and hide, and I could be okay.
All right, my friend. Well, give my best to your wife, Liz. She's one of my favorite people. So I will see you very soon, and we'll talk before you get on a plane. All right, brother?
Clean my yacht for me while you're there, okay?
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Goodbye.
Bye.